So today is May 29th, 2010. Okay, we start. Is this working all right? Okay, we start with the homage to the Buddha. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Okay, good morning. Okay, we come back now to Sutta number 26 in the Majjhima Nikaya. And we are at page 260, and this will be paragraph number 19. And if you remember, 2 classes ago, we dealt with the enlightenment of the Buddha as explained in this sutta, which is stated very simply, stated very simply, very concisely. This would be in the previous paragraph on page 259. He says here, very simply, being myself subject to birth, having understood the danger in what is subject to birth, seeking the unborn supreme security from bondage, nibbana, I attain the unborn supreme security from bondage, nibbana. Same thing with aging, sickness, death, sorrow and defilement. So seeking the undefiled supreme security from bondage, nibbana, I attain the undefiled supreme security from bondage, nibbana. Then the knowledge and vision arose in me, my deliverance is unshakable, this is my last birth, now there is no renewal of being, no more renewed existence. So at that point we took a detour into Sutta number 36, in which the Buddha explains more precisely what took place on his quest for enlightenment. After finding this delightful spot in Uruvela, according to that sutta, he began to practice these extreme ascetic practices, carrying them on to the point where he almost died. Then he realized that the ascetic practices are not useful. He thinks, is there another way to enlightenment? He remembers this incident that took place in his childhood when he entered into the meditative state, the first jhana. Then he thought that must be the way to enlightenment. Then he gave up the ascetic practices, began taking food, normal food, until he regained his physical strength. Then he enters into the 4 jhanas. Then he develops the 3 higher knowledges, the recollection of past lives, the knowledge of passing away and rebirth of beings, and the knowledge of the destruction of defilements. And then that brings the liberation of the mind. Okay, so we have these 2 different perspectives on the enlightenment. And now we come back from Sutta number 36 to Sutta number 26, where the Buddha is still sitting in the vicinity of the Bodhi tree, And now he's going to sort of review or recollect his experience of enlightenment. And then it's a sort of, what do I do now? I had a friend who summarized very concisely what is the difference between an arahant and a bodhisattva. An arahant is always thinking, what do I do now? And the bodhisattva is always thinking, what do I do next? Okay, so now the Buddha is reviewing his realization, his attainment. So he says, I considered this Dhamma that I have attained is profound, hard to see, hard to understand, peaceful and sublime, unattainable by mere reasoning, by mere logic. The taka vacharo, literally it's outside the range of reasoning, rationalism. It's subtle and pandita vedaniyo. It's to be experienced by the wise, to be realized by the wise. Okay, so this is a kind of review of the Dhamma that he has attained. Mayam Dhammo abhigato. Okay, now you can see he's starting to think about the possibility of teaching others, because now his mind turns from the Dhamma that he's realized and it looks out upon sentient beings. And then he sees that, he says, this generation, or maybe better, usually generation, nowadays we used to speak about the beat generation, the lost generation, Generation X. What is the current generation?
Y.
Y. Letter Y or?
Letter Y. Generation B.
Me?
Yeah.
Oh, that was in the 1980s.
Exactly.
Okay, but the word used here in Pali, it's paja, would maybe better be rendered population. In fact, that's what I use now. This population. Then we have an expression that's a little bit hard to translate very exactly into English. Here I render it delights in attachment. But the word that's used here in Pali is alaya. Which has several implications or sort of dimensions of meaning. On the one hand, alaya can indicate the subjective act of clinging, adherence. And also it suggests that which one clings to, the objects of clinging. And also the word suggests something like the lair of an animal, like the den of an animal. So that it's a place that one repeatedly goes back to, maybe seeking safety and security. The place that's familiar, the place where one feels at home. And so we could say that from the Buddha's perspective here, this population, that means especially the human population, in other words, us, delights in clinging to things, in the objects of clinging, and we're so settled into our homes, our familiar territories, that it's hard for us to break out and to look at things from a different point of view, especially a point of view that will ask us to give up our clinging. So this population delights in attachment, takes delight in attachment, rejoices in attachment. And now, this is a very important statement because this is going to show us what the Buddha realized through his enlightenment. He says, and what is that Dhamma that the Buddha just referred to in the previous sentence? The Dhamma that's profound, hard to see, and hard to understand. Here we see that this Dharma has two aspects to it. First aspect, he says, it is hard for such a population to see this truth, or this principle, namely specific conditionality, dependent origination. So this first aspect of the Buddha's enlightenment is paticca samuppada, dependent origination, and it's also called here, I render it, I think following Bhikkhu Nyanamoli, specific conditionality. And in Pali, it's Pali, it's called idapachayata, which this is a compound that's made up of a prefix idam, which simply means this. Pachaya means condition, and the ta at the end turns it into an abstract noun. Something like the English word nis, or ship, or hood. Or ITY, in fact. And so this is, in a way, it's a shorthand expression for the formula that we meet with sometimes in the text, idang sati, imasmin sati, idang hoti, imasupada, idang upajati. That is, when X exists, Y comes to be. Through the arising of X, Y arises. So it means that one thing originates through something specific as its condition. And in a way, this is like a compressed term that incorporates the whole 12-fold formula of dependent origination, with ignorance as condition, the volitional activities originate. With the volitional activities as condition, consciousness originates, and so on, all the ways down. With birth as condition, there is old age, death, sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and despair. So dependent origination, specific conditionality, they're two terms for the same thing, this phenomena, or this principle of phenomena arising in dependence on conditions. And those conditions in turn originate through other factors as their conditions. And those other factors originate with still other factors as their conditions. And so we have this whole series, or better, a whole network of phenomena originating through their specific conditions. Is my voice carrying to the back?
Yes.
It is.
Okay, so we could say that is one part of the Buddha's realization. Then the other part, the counterpart to this, is indicated by the next sentence. He says, and it is hard to see this truth, or this principle, namely the stilling or quieting down of all formations, all volitional formations, all volitional activities, the relinquishing or giving up of all acquisitions, everything that we acquire and hold to has to be relinquished and given up. The destruction of craving, dispassion, cessation, nirvana. So that is the other side. So we have, on the one hand, that principle that lies behind the continuation of the cycle of samsara, the round of birth and death, and that is dependent origination, phenomena originating dependent on other phenomena. Now in the Sutta number 36, we saw the Buddha expressed his realization in terms of the Four Noble Truths. So if we take this side of specific conditionality or dependent origination, we can see in this the first two Noble Truths. So, craving, ignorance, clinging, karmic activities, those are all expressing the second Noble Truth, the truth of the origination of suffering. And then the results like birth, old age, and death, that is expressing the truth of suffering. And then in the second statement, where we have the series of terms, all are just synonyms for nibbana, we have the third Noble Truth. And then what's not stated here, but implied by the third Noble Truth, is the path to nibbana. That is the Noble Eightfold Path. Okay, so now the Buddha is reflecting on these two aspects of his realization. And then he thinks to himself, if I were to teach the Dhamma, others would not understand me. And that would be wearying and troublesome for me. And then he expresses the same idea in verse. He says, enough with teaching the Dhamma that even I found hard to reach, for it will never be perceived by those who live in lust and hate. Those died in lust, that was Venerable Nyanamoli. I might say those excited by lust or aroused by lust, those wrapped in darkness, will never discern this abstruse Dhamma which goes against the stream, the worldly stream, which is subtle, deep, and difficult to see. Very beautifully expressed verses. Okay, then the Buddha now, he's reflecting again and again. Probably he was thinking of this not just once, but throughout the day, or maybe several days. And then he says, he comes to the conclusion, considering thus, my mind inclined to inaction, or maybe we could rephrase that to dwelling at ease, just living without much activity, taking it easy, living peacefully in the forest, meditating quietly, rather than to teaching the Dhamma. Okay, now, this is the scene I always like when I imagine myself maybe taking up my career as a film producer. We have, like, back in those days, Cecil B. DeMille, was it? You know, the greatest story ever told, 10 Commandments. So here we have the Buddha sitting on the seat of enlightenment. You know, the morning mists have been dispelled as the sun is rising. And now Brahmasahampati, this is like one of the deities in the very high heavenly worlds. He's up there in the heaven, and he's looking down at the Buddha, and he knows what's going on in the Buddha's mind. And so it says he knew with his mind the thought in my mind, and he considered the world will be lost, the world will perish, since the mind of the Tathagata, the Arahat, the fully enlightened one, inclines to inaction, to living at ease, rather than to teaching the Dhamma. Then just as quickly as a strong man might extend his flexed arm, his arm in the normal position, he stretches it out, or just as he might pull in his outstretched arm, Brahmasahampati vanished in the Brahma world, this high heavenly realm, and he appeared before me. And then according to the commentary, when Brahmasahampati descends into the human world, he doesn't come just alone, but he's accompanied by thousands and thousands of attendants, other deities from his realm. So this is what makes the filming of the sequence so exciting. Okay, now Brahmasahampati, as we said, he is regarded as one of the high divinities in the Buddhist picture of the universe. But when he comes to the Buddha's presence, he's like a good, pious lay devotee. So he arranges his upper robe on one shoulder. It's considered the polite, respectful way to arrange the robe. Then he puts his hands together in a respectful salutation. This is what they call Anjali in India. So holding his hands up like this towards the Buddha. According to the same version of the sutta in the Sutta Nikaya, he bends down with one knee on the ground, and then he says to the Buddha, he's sort of pleading with the Buddha now. Yeah, he says, cut camera. Okay, he says, Venerable Sir, let the Blessed One teach the Dhamma, let the Sublime One teach the Dhamma. There are beings with little dust in their eyes who are wasting away, who will perish if they don't get to hear the Dhamma. Then he gives the Buddha this assurance. There will be those who will understand the Dhamma. And then he makes the same appeal in verse, again, these are very beautiful verses. He says in Magadha is the state of northeast India, roughly corresponding to Bihar, the state of Bihar today. He says, in Magadha there have appeared till now impure teachings devised by those still stained. Open the doors to the deathless. Let them hear the Dhamma that the stainless one has found. Just as one who stands on a mountain peak can see below the people all around, so, O wise one, all-seeing sage, ascend the palace of the Dhamma. Let the sorrowless one survey humankind, this human population, engulfed in sorrow, overcome by birth and old age. And again, now he gets very emotional. He says, arise, O victorious hero, caravan leader, debtless one, and wander in the world. Let the Blessed One teach the Dhamma. There will be those who will understand. Okay, so now Brahmasahampati has delivered his message. And now the Buddha doesn't immediately consent to teach. But after he listens to Brahma's entreaty, then he says, out of compassion for living beings, I surveyed the world with the eye of a Buddha. This would be like a special kind of faculty of spiritual vision by which the Buddha can now look out over the world and see into the minds of sentient beings. He can see their potentials, their karmic accumulations, their qualities, faculties, dispositions, and so on. And so then he says, when I surveyed the world with the eye of a Buddha, I saw beings with little dust in their eyes and with much dust in their eyes. Those with keen faculties and dull faculties, with good qualities and with bad qualities, those who were easy to teach and hard to teach, and some who dwelt seeing fear and blame in the other world. I think this means those who see the danger even in any kind of rebirth, even in a heavenly realm. And then he illustrates this with, again, it's a very beautiful simile, a simile of a pond of lotus flowers. Just as in a pond of blue, red, or white lotuses, some lotuses that are born and grow in the world thrive underwater and don't rise up from the pond. Other lotuses rise to the surface of the water and remain there. And then there are some other lotuses that grow up in the water and they rise out of the water and they stand clear, unwetted by the water. So too, surveying the world with the eye of the Buddha, I saw beings with these different qualities. And then I replied to Brahmasahampati in verse. This is a famous verse. He says, open for them are the doors to the deathless. Let those with ears, in other words, those who can hear the teaching, now show their faith. Because having faith or trust, this is the quality of mind that makes one open, that enables one to open one's mind in order to listen and try to understand the teaching. Thinking it would be troublesome, Brahma, I did not speak the Dhamma subtle and sublime. Okay, so now the Buddha has agreed to teach the Dhamma, and so Brahma realizes his mission has been accomplished, and so he says, the Blessed One has consented to my request to teach the Dhamma, and then Brahma Sahampati pays homage to the Buddha, even though he's a chief divinity, but he bows down respectfully to the Buddha, circles him, keeping the right side to him, another sign of respect, and then he disappears on the spot. Okay, several interesting questions come up in this story. At least two. I could raise the questions. Let's see if we can find answers for them. One is, probably all of you know the traditional account that's held both in the Theravada tradition, Mahayana tradition. They both agree on this, that before the Buddha came into this final existence, many, many aeons ago, he made a vow to achieve Buddhahood, which turned him into a bodhisattva. Then he practiced developing the excellent qualities, the paramitas or paramis for many lives, giving up his eyes, his arms, his blood, his body, his life, his wives, his children, his kingdoms, all of his possessions, in order to fulfill the paramitas, all for the purpose of achieving Buddhahood, so he could teach the Dhamma to the world. But now he looks out on the world, and then he considers his enlightenment. He thinks, should I teach? Should I not teach? Then he thinks, it's too difficult. Let me just take it easy and live peacefully by myself, not undergoing all of this wearisome frustration and disappointment in trying to teach others. Okay, so that's one question. How do we reconcile this idea of an original vow to achieve Buddhahood, many lives of developing spiritual perfections, all for the purpose of teaching, and now he decides, I won't teach. Okay, that's one problem. Then maybe the other question that comes up is this descent of Mahabrahma. But actually, the two problems are interrelated. What is going on here? Is this to be taken literally, or is this some kind of dramatic representation of an internal debate taking place in the Buddha's own mind? What do you think about these two questions, either individually or both? Any ideas? Okay, Trey, if you can put your...
There's several things.
You can speak and sew at the same time?
Yeah.
Knit, speak and knit as well.
Yeah, I think several things come to mind. I mean, on the one hand, you could just say it's, it's literary. This is just a literary convention. It's possible.
What is the literary convention?
Sahamabrahma, Brahma coming down.
Brahma coming down.
Yeah, and it's just a nice literary convention of he's debating with himself. Now, as to the Bodhisattva vow, you could even say that's a literary device, and whatever.
Yeah.
But let's say it's real. Let's just, for fun's sake, yes, he really did that.
Yeah.
Did all these things. But he wasn't enlightened then. He just had this idea of enlightenment. God leaves you willikers, I want to be a Tathagata, a Buddha. But he didn't know what it would be like, right? He wasn't
Yeah.
enlightened. So, and we can find this in our own lives.
You can find what?
You can find this in your own life. Sometimes when you wish for something or want for something, maybe not as exalted as that, and you finally get it, and you're like, oh, this is what it's like. It's not what I thought it was going to be like. So he finally realizes Nibbana, and he's like, oh, can you teach this?
Yeah.
Look at people.
Yeah.
So he didn't know.
Yeah.
So he didn't consider it.
Yeah.
He was human,
Yeah. Maybe it's a little bit, to put it in somewhat mundane terms. Somebody thinks, I want to be,
I want to be president. It's a hard job.
yeah, I was thinking of that, but then to put it a little more accessible level, well, maybe for a Buddha it shouldn't be so accessible, but somebody thinks, I want to be a college professor. So then they go through all of the trouble, going to graduate school, getting a PhD, writing dissertation, coming up and passing the dissertation exam. Okay, they get the PhD degree, then they go out to the job market for the interviews, the different universities. Finally, one university hires them and says, okay, you start in the fall. Okay, maybe this is the interview is in April or May. Then all over the summer he's thinking, how am I going to teach in the university? They want me to give 3 courses, and the students these days are so intractable, so rebellious, so troublesome. So maybe it's a little bit like that. Not to mention becoming, you get elected president in November, then everything is all glorious up to Inauguration Day. You have the inauguration ball, what is it, January 20th? And nowadays there are 5 balls, so you have to attend all 5 of them. And everybody is congratulating you, you're dancing, the cameras are flashing, all the celebrities are coming. Then the ball is over, you go to the White House, sleep. The next day you wake up and you're president, and one group of advisors say, Afghanistan, what are we going to do? Taliban, suicide bombers here. President Karzai there. His brother making this trouble. Iraq. These people saying, get out of Iraq, get out. These people are saying, you have to stay in. Then there is the healthcare issue, climate bill, jobs bill, economic problems. Oh my heavens, and I have 4 more years of this. Just the first day. Yeah. But that's a good idea, Joe.
Yeah, I'm actually in complete agreement with Dre's comment. I just want to present it with my own language.
Maybe speak a little more loudly.
Maybe I should push something.
No, it's working, but okay.
My understanding, or my current misunderstanding, is that on the night of his enlightenment, the Buddha went through a complete psychological tear down and break up and rebuilding, and that is a process that is not open to cognitive understanding. The vow was made in the same way that you said, you want to be this, you want to be that, you want to be the president, you want to be that. And that is a cognitive process about what one imagines, but the reorientation that I currently believe occurs during such an epiphany, if I may, is not expressible by definition, I think.
Yeah.
And so that could account for taking a while to integrate. And during that integration period, the cognitive part starts coming back and says, oh yes, this is what I've been preparing for. And then it can be it can be dealt with that way. So moving on to the Brahma Sahampati appearance, I would have had a different opinion years ago, but my current opinion is that to ask whether this is a literary device or not asks me to have an opinion about cosmology,
Yeah.
which is not what my practice is.
You mean your practice is not concerned with whether...
I have no answer to those
Yeah.
questions,
Yeah.
nor are they the ones that concern me.
Yeah. Okay, but I'm just asking, how are we to understand, even though it might not concern you,
Both
but,
ways.
yeah, I'm still asking, how are we to understand the appearance of Brahma Sahampati here?
It is, if I may,
Yeah,
both may be true, and I don't know.
yeah. Okay, so let's see if Susie is.
I constantly bring my early upbringing with me, but I think of the book, St. Thomas's Dark Night of the Soul.
St. John of the Cross.
St. John of the Cross,
Yeah.
excuse me, St. Thomas, I don't know where he came from. The Dark Night of the Soul, which parallels the having to let go. The first dark night is letting go of material things, and the
Yeah.
second dark night is letting go of thought and opinion.
Yeah,
And they culminate in this awakening idea.
yeah,
It's similar. But I also was thinking the famous last temptation of Christ idea. You know, just this is the last threshold to break through. That's a different image in that, but the last threshold of finally achieving Buddhahood, understanding what it actually means, as
Yeah.
Andre said,
Yeah.
which to me was like, oh yeah, I get it. Understanding what it really means and what it will entail, and then making that last effort.
yeah,
But in the second, is Brahma an internal debate? You know, if we're just playing around here with ideas, the jihad in the Muslim tradition, the true jihad is the conflict within oneself.
yeah,
And it's a similar idea again in Christianity and with St. Teresa's interior castle
Yeah.
of going inward, going inward, going inward. And
Yeah.
it feels very much to me like it's an internal debate. I mean, I vote on that side.
yeah.
That it's, that
Okay,
this
so
is
you,
the
you,
middle.
don't, you wouldn't take it literally?
I don't take it literally,
Okay.
but although I take it absolutely that it's going on inside.
Okay. What's actually interesting, you mentioned the last temptation. Okay, in this passage we have the Buddha on his own inclining not to teach, and Brahma comes to the Buddha to persuade him to teach. Now there's a passage that comes in the Mahaparinibbana Sutta. Yeah, please turn off cell phones, otherwise I have to reshoot many scenes. Okay, there's a passage that comes in the Mahaparinibbana Sutta where the Buddha is speaking to Ananda, and he's speaking about an incident that took place right after his enlightenment. It doesn't come in other suttas. In this passage, as the Buddha relates it, he says after his enlightenment, Mara came to him and said, "It's enough, Lord, that you've gotten enlightenment. Don't teach the Dhamma. Just pass into final nirvana." And then at that point the Buddha says, stop Mara, I will not pass into parinibbana, into final nirvana, until I have monk, nun, male lay followers and female lay followers who have learned my Dhamma well, who have achieved attainment in it, who are able to expound it, disclose it, teach it to others, and spread it widely through the world. And here, like, instead of Brahma being the sort of devotee pleading with the Buddha, we have Mara being the obstructionist, trying to create, in a way, supporting that temptation not to teach. Anybody else here have some? You're wrong, you usually have some ideas.
May I just add, it's like the little dimple and the little angel on the shoulder that you see.
Yeah, I
in
remember
cartoons.
it was in the cartoons that we used to see as kids. Is it Pluto the dog? Is that Mickey Mouse's dog?
That's Mickey Mouse's, yes.
Pluto.
Pluto.
Mickey Mouse gives some instruction to Pluto, like, don't chew on the furniture or something like that. Then the two little Plutos come on his shoulder. One is like with the wings and the halo and says, follow your master, don't chew on the furniture, you'll be a good dog. Then on the other shoulder there's the a little version of Pluto with the horns and long tail. And he says, don't listen to that guy. Chew on the furniture, doesn't matter. It's fun. Okay.
What's confusing to me is because it seems to be like an underlying debate. Because the way I understand is that the Buddha is omniscient, so wouldn't he already know there are beings that are capable of being taught? You know?
Wait, I didn't quite catch you. We put the, okay.
He ends up teaching to the ascetics that he was practicing with. So wouldn't he have already known through his eye wisdom that there are beings that are right for being taught? It seems that coming to teach him kind of discredits his enlightenment, because for one, I didn't think that Deva, so-called samsara, were capable of understanding the light being's mind. And I feel he would already have knowledge of that without a being stuck in samsara needing to tell him that there are beings that are right. So what do you think about that?
He's speaking of Buddha's omniscience.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't he already know that there were beings who, is that what you mean?
Yeah.
Why wouldn't he already know that there are beings out there who could be taught?
Yeah,
Because he's
it's an
omniscient.
interesting question. I mean, I don't know the answer to this, but maybe somebody have some ideas about this. Yeah, Drea?
I just relating back to what I said earlier, I think a lot of it is a literary device.
Yeah.
That, a lot of the canon, a lot of the canon is redacted. You can't necessarily read it literally. Okay. They got the monks after the Buddha's death they got Ananda to basically spout out everything he remembered that the Buddha said, along with everybody else's collective memory. They realized we better write it down. And there were a lot of redactors. There's a lot of different versions of the Holy Canon. And people wrote on different things. And it's also the custom in all cosmological literature, in any tradition, to have these literary expositions, whether it could be an angel visiting, Saint Teresa, or whatever. It's very common stuff. It is a good way to explain the struggle within ourselves, or within oneself. That's just my opinion. I think you have to look at things a little critically and not disingenuously.
Maybe Bowie wants to say something. Good.
Last night, an answer is a question instead. Is it possible because the vow of Bodhisattva, the Buddha made in the past, still had the momentum, just like these 5 aggregates, that continues to exist even after his enlightenment? So if the Buddha stopped at the moment of his enlightenment, about his bodhisattva vow, then he wouldn't have the conflict. So in other words, for another person who had never made a bodhisattva vow in the past, the person, if enlightened, wouldn't have the conflict that Buddha had.
Yeah. So you say a person who hadn't made the bodhisattva vow might have had that conflict.
Yeah,
What
because
is
they continue, that seed, that if we put it in that term, that seed continue to exist. He has to eradicate that seed. It's just like there's the remaining momentum of that vow.
You're asking, does that vow continue to have its momentum
Right.
at the time of the Enlightenment?
That's just my
Okay,
question.
now what's interesting actually, there's like several conflicting or maybe incompatible strands even within the early text. First, we don't find in the very early canon, the Nikayas, any statement that the Buddha in a past life made the Bodhisattva vow and then practiced paramitas over many lives to become a Buddha. This we start to find, it probably already comes in before the rise of Mahayana Buddhism, but in the period where maybe over several generations after the Buddha's passing away. So within the Pali tradition, the earliest texts that speak about that Bodhisattva vow would be texts like Buddhavamsa, Charya Pitaka, which maybe date from about even 3rd century, 2nd century BC. So on the one hand, we don't find explicit mention of a bodhisattva vow and the fulfillment of perfections. But now on the other hand, there are some texts which suggest, again, this could be a literary device, that the Buddha, before his enlightenment,